While there is no definitive proof, it certainly appears that Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was murdered inside a Saudi consulate on October 2nd. Khashoggi had a huge following in the Middle East, and because he wrote for the Washington Post, it's a story that's not going away. This week, the Post printed Jamal Khashoggi's last column. Ironically, a piece calling for freedom of expression in the Arab world, something lacking in Saudi Arabia.
He just saw how journalism was being smashed around the Arab world. It is poetic, and it is fitting that this would be the last column that I would edit for him.
If Saudi authorities thought no one would care about a missing journalist, they made a gross misjudgment.
Britain is calling on Saudi Arabia to provide urgent answers.
And despite claims from the Saudi crown prince that he knows nothing of the disappearance, the New York Times reports his associates were involved.
The Times also reports several of the suspects have ties to the Saudi crown prince, like this man, Mahar Abdulaziz Mutreb.
Just days after his disappearance, the Washington Post obtained a heavily edited video purporting to show what happened the day Khashoggi disappeared.
The video then shows Khashoggi arriving at the Saudi consulate.
The Post also reports there is audio of him being tortured, putting the pressure on the Saudis to explain what happened.
We may be nearing an answer tonight.
And let's not whitewash the grisly details. At some point, this audio is going to surface. I thought it would have come out by now. I know that the Washington Post and other news organizations have asked for it, whether they've heard it. And then we're going to face that question that news media has faced many times over with the beheading of Danny Pearl and Berg. Do you just put it out there? Because it's going to be hideously gruesome. There's obviously a torture scene, and then somebody gets out a saw and starts cutting body parts off while he's alive. But I think there's an interesting development here in that at least the Saudis have admitted they had something to do with it. I mean, originally claiming they had nothing. And they're working on a story. That's what they're working on right now. What's our story, and are we going to stick with it?
It seems that they engage in this type of behavior so frequently that it hadn't occurred to them that this was going to be different.
Especially because it's a journalist. Who would care?
Right, exactly. I mean, by the way, last week we talked about this. I speculated that this was an arrest gone bad. That no longer seems to be the case.
Yeah, I was skeptical about that.
Yeah, no, I know you
An interrogation gone bad. Yeah, it's going bad because they're cutting his fingers off.
Right, exactly. So the big question is, when this audio becomes available, should we be posting it on our websites? I would say yes, but I would put a caution on this. Unlike some of the cases that you've talked about in the past, I think there is a real challenge of authenticating this and making sure that this is exactly what it purports to be. And if we can't do that, then maybe we shouldn't be broadcasting it.
What really bothers me about this story, I think, is you know, we've been predicting that if you have the kind of rhetoric that we have seen over the last couple of years now, it becomes more than just a joke, more than just a line, that there are real serious consequences. And, you know, I've been thinking more about what happens in this country, but you've been hearing reports about, you know, other places in the world where there is this sense that, yes, we've been doing this, but now we can even be more bold about the way that we do this because the big United States that normally would stand up to us, well, look what they're doing.
They how can they congressmen who body slam
exactly,
reporters.
And that was more recently. And so if the world has in the past looked at what we do and use it as an example as to how they should behave or what kind of actions will be taken if they misbehave, then you know, we've been providing them with some examples that allow these kinds of things to happen. And can we connect the dots directly to this? No, we can't. But I think there's a lot of certainly evidence that would hold up in a court that points in that direction.
I had the exact opposite reaction, actually. I mean, I felt, you know, the things that you're talking about and that you laid out are serious. I feel like they're aberrations. Reading his last column for the Washington Post, Khashoggi's last column, made you realize how we really take for granted the freedom that we have in this country to criticize elected officials, to criticize the president, to mock the president. I mean, the things that he was saying in that column felt so tame, so complete. He was just garden variety criticizing the government for not giving its citizens freedom. And yet that's the kind of thing that in certain other countries can get you tortured and killed. You know, as bad as we think it is, we have so much freedom here that we take for granted.
No, and I agree with you. I mean, we do have the freedom, but I think when you have these countries where these kinds of things have been happening for a long time, right? Mostly it stays away from, you know, we're not going to go and do a high-profile American or someone tied to the United States, because we know there's going to be that world, you know, anger that will come down on us. But there are examples of those world leaders who are saying, well, we could do this. They're doing that, right? This is what they do to their people in the United States. How can they be mad at us?
We had 40 years ago when Jimmy Carter was president. Then we had Orlando Letelier, who was had been briefly the president of Chile. Not president; he was foreign minister of Chile, but went into exile when Pinochet, I think, took over the government there. Driving in a car around DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., the car blew up. It had been car bombed by an assassination team that went from Chile to Washington, put the bomb in the car, blew him up, killed 2 Americans along with Letelier. Ultimately, the U.S. Justice Department got involved, extradited, and at least found a couple of the people involved in that case, brought them back, and they were sentenced to life in prison. But the idea of extranational assassination like that, involving an American or someone like Khashoggi, who had a green card, you know, this should not go unpunished, and there ought to be, hopefully, severe law enforcement steps.
Clearly, the Saudi Crown Prince thought that Trump would be on board with this because it was a lowly journalist.
And they're obviously going to hang now a major general somehow or behead him.
Totally.
That's how you do it.
Along with 10,000 other innocent citizens.
Right.